We're on the record.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon. This is the case of FIC 2018-0661, J. Hardison against Tara Achman et al. And I'm Commissioner Christopher Hankins. And with me today is Attorney Valisha Harmon. Harmon, I'm sorry. I have a hearing also at 2:30 today, and I know there's sophisticated litigants here, counsel and the complainant. Do you want the customary reading of the 5-minute introduction of what the procedural nature of the case is, or
we will waive it?
Do you want to waive it, or do you want me to go through it?
I'll waive it.
Okay.
So can I just ask the parties, originally we had docketed this one way, and we had a motion by Mr. Hardison, and now the case caption, and really the respondent parties have been changed. Did everybody get notice of Commissioner Higgins?
Yes, we certainly did.
Is that a problem for you?
Not at all. I viewed it more as a clarification because the captioned parties were also members of the board, which was a respondent. Right.
Well, yes. And so when I got the original request, because I don't think I had it in the file, Mr. Hardison, so we looked at it and we saw that it went to BOE member Ms. McCammon and of the Board of Education. So I guess the superintendent shouldn't have been named because he's not the one to whom the request was made. Just so the respondents are okay with the docketing change. Mr. Hardison,
no objection.
Why it was changed? Do you understand why the change was made?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, perfect.
Okay. All right. And let's see what else. And apparently it's a very narrow issue that we're here for today. Attorney Harmon and I have narrowed it down, and it's based on this reference. If I may read it.
Sure.
It says the salient portion of it is Ms. McCammon on June 1st, 2017, Nadine Vessel sent you an email requesting that you provide any and all documents responsive to my May 19th, 2017 FYA request. You indicated to me in a private conversation that you replied in writing to Ms. Vazel's request. Then, pursuant to the FOIA, I hereby request your response to Ms. Vazel's email request and all records created by any person with respect to this FOIA request. And that's really what we're here for today. Okay. So that being the case,
well, maybe we can mark that. Can someone have a copy of that underlying request, Mr. Hardison?
If the parties,
we have extras here.
I would like to mark one. Those are marked up. So I Do you?
Okay.
I'll take it. Any objection to the underlying request being marked as Respondents 1?
Can I just take a look at it?
Sure.
That's fine.
Okay, so Respondents 1 is the September 14th, 2018 email from the complainant to Ms. McCammon, and it's CC to other folks, but it's basically to Ms. McCammon. Respondents 1. Do you have any other? I'll go back to the complainant if we want to do documents now.
Sure.
Do you have any documents? Thank you, Attorney Mooney. You have a lot?
A lot.
Oh, before we get into the documents, I just wanted to build upon the hearing officer's observation that we're here dealing with the September 14th request.
Yes.
Respondents 1. And, but that's a request under FOI. We have a complaint that's being adjudicated. And I just wanted to clarify our understanding that the complaint, and I'm quoting from the complaint, there's some, from our perspective, extraneous argument. This complaint has to do with this request, and the complaint includes the following statement. regarding the district's response, explanation, and attachment, which is the subject of this complaint, I believe the district is with...
I forgot the white file. I'm going to have to go grab it.
Okay.
I'm so
All right,
sorry.
we're
I'm
done.
sorry.
I'll stand up.
Full hall. I think 2:30 is optimistic, huh?
Oh.
Okay, back on the record. And document number 200661.
Okay. I'll just start over if I may.
Please.
We've just clarified pursuant to Respondents 1 that the origin of this complaint is a request dated September 14th, which is now in evidence as Respondent 1. I just wanted to clarify the scope of this hearing, which is the district's response to this complaint and Mr. Hardison's complaint statement, which is regarding the district's response, paren, explanation and attachment, close paren, which is the subject of this complaint. I believe the district is withholding illegally additional responsive records to my FOI request based on the response below. So that is why we're here. I just wanted to clarify that.
The only thing that the commissioner has jurisdiction over is Ms. McCammon's response to the forwarding of the FOI request by Ms. Vassal to Ms. McCammon, and then any records created in response to this FOI request, Respondents 1.
Yes.
That's it.
We appreciate the clarification. Okay. That's how we understand it.
I mean, that's
My only question about that, there's clearly supported documentation regarding this request. We'll get in. We'll see if it's allowed.
Well, we're not going to relitigate what was litigated and decided in 2017-0615.
That was in front of Hearing Officer Perpetua?
That was in front of Attorney Perpetua.
Yeah, that-
right.
We don't need to relitigate it.
No, but I mean if that's part of the subject, that you would have to do a compliance on that with him kind of thing.
But the thing is that when you say, this sets our jurisdiction, you say, I hereby request your response to Ms. Vassal's email. So then you file a complaint, and we have jurisdiction over what you requested, which is Ms. McCammon's response to Ms. Vassal sending her an email request dated May 19, 2017. So however she responded, if it's in writing, you should have received that. But she could have responded, okay, I'll take a look. That could be all she said, and then she could have, we don't know, right? And then
we do. We have their production. And it includes the request from 2017-0615. Mrs. Vassal's request is below what they produced as Mrs. McCammon's response.
Okay, so you have it.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so then why are we here? If you have, the
That's why I quoted Mr.
There's additional
Hardison's.
information I'm not getting.
Okay, well then that's the question for the respondents. Is there anything that you're withholding? But it seems to me this is pretty limited in terms of you're saying to Ms. McCammon, you received something from Ms. Vassal, and I want to know how you responded to Ms. Vassal when you received that email. That's what you asked for, Mr. Hardison.
True. I'm not denying that.
Okay, just so, because...
But Mrs. McCammon's response was in response to my request in 2017-0615.
Right, but you have to understand, always go back to the instant request. The underlying request in docket number 2018-0661, which is this case,
right,
is the request from September 14th, 2018, not the request from the case that was litigated in front of Attorney Perpetua, because you're asking for something different in this case than you asked for in that case.
That's not the case.
Well, I have your request from 2017-0615.
Yep.
And it's paragraphs and paragraphs. This is much more refined. You're saying you received something, and I want to know how you responded to it. That's what you're saying to Ms. McCammon in this case. You're not saying, give me any and all documents related to any actual proposed independent. You're not asking for the same records. You're asking for her response to something she received by email.
But the response they provided, and they produced per this FOIA request, is her response to that request.
Okay, but it's a different request. We can't look at it in terms of 2017-0615 because what you asked for in the two cases, the request in the two cases is not the same.
I understand that.
Okay, all right. I think that
That's but bear in mind, and maybe I don't know what you call it, administrative notice.
no, we don't need to take administrative notice of 2017-0615 because the requests are not the same. The requests for records are not the same. So what do you want to offer? Do you want to stay on the record?
Yeah, why don't we just stay on the record?
All right.
For all of this.
So we have response 1, which is the underlying request in this case.
Right.
What do you want to offer, Mr. Hardison?
This is by stipulation, so it's got to be by agreement.
Which one? We're doing it by stipulation?
You want to go by, no.
I don't know that we will.
Okay, right, we don't need, all right, let's,
We'll skip the.
Well, we may get a lot of objections.
yeah, let's just skip through everything.
So
Okay.
your first proposed exhibit, pass it to attorney.
That's the original request, and her response, Malika Ford's response to
So this is
076.
So this is a responsive document?
We object.
Well, that goes before the,
This relates to the
Predates.
other FOI case.
Yeah, this isn't,
Predates.
this isn't relevant.
Well, then I need a clarification. These are responses to the exact same case,
Not the exact.
but this is what they provided. The same response to this is what they provided as production in this instant case.
Well, then those are your responsive records. That's maybe what they gave you. I don't know.
okay, well, if I may, okay, so I take it, Mr. Hardison, you're looking for documents that you say they didn't give you, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So you're going to give us the ones that they did, right?
Correct.
I don't understand that then. I mean, if they've given you you're looking for documents, right?
But can I? So their production in the instant case
Right.
is the same response as these responses in
Okay.
the other case.
All right.
And below it, they copied the same request.
Okay.
So if that's what they're introducing as their production, I believe all this is relevant, and I'll show how it's relevant.
But you want to show us, you want to show the commissioner what they gave you in response to this September 14th, 2018 request?
Sure, do you not have it?
No, it's attached to the complaint.
It's
There are two records that are attached to the complaint, and we stipulate that those were the responsive records to Respondent 1.
I'm just saying that what I'm saying, Mr. Hardison, is that's not probative of anything.
But
That they've complied. Okay, so they comply. You're saying that you're complaining that they gave you everything in the September 14th, 2018 request that they did prior.
no,
Okay. Except for the missing documents. You want some missing documents, right?
correct,
You
So-
think that there's missing documents.
You think there's missing documents.
correct.
Okay, yeah. You think there's missing documents. So then you have to somehow get to the point that there's missing documents.
Well,
because
I
if
shall.
the documents that you've
Well, are
received.
these the two pages that Attorney Mooney was talking about attached to the request? Is that what was attached to the request? So they're saying, are these, from the respondent's position, are these the only responsive records that are responsive to Respondents 1?
Yes.
No. The only non-exempt responsive records, because as we noted in our response to Mr. Hardison, we did withhold records pursuant to 1-210B10.
Okay,
For
so,
attorney-client privilege
so-
communication,
All right,
which
so-
we
I
are
want to
prepared
address that.
to
attorney-client
hold
privilege.
on, you can't do it that way. So in response to Respondents 1, which is the underlying request for records in this case, the respondents disclosed these two documents.
Correct.
And withheld other documents on a claim of exemption.
Correct.
So they're saying, I pulled these out of the FOI's file. These are the documents they disclosed to you.
Agreed.
In response to,
I have those.
okay. So you don't have anything else responsive to the underlying request because they haven't given it to you. Is that right?
That's correct.
Can I just explain something?
Okay, give it a shot.
These
We wouldn't be here today. For this case would not exist had they produced that in 0615, 2007. That is responsive to my initial request.
But we're not litigating that request. We're not litigating the request that you've heard.
But they responded. So if you look at the long, where Mrs. McCammon's actual answer is, it's the original request that they responded with. In other words, they didn't just send me Mrs. McCammon's response. My original request.
I think it's the top part is why they're giving it to you. It says, "Hello, Nadine. I have not received any correspondence. Thank you." And they gave you where she opened it.
Right.
And that's what is non-exempt from the respondent's
But is
consent.
Mrs. McCammon's response to the instant request in this case, or is it to 0615?
May I?
Yes.
Mr. Hardison is conflating two separate requests, but this request refers to his earlier request because Respondent 1 says, Nadine Vasil sent you an email requesting you provide any and all documents responses to my May 19, 2017 FOI request. So that's why
Right.
this is being confused. Mr. Hardison says, I want to see that response by virtue of an FOI request September 14,
Right.
2018.
You haven't requested the underlying documents that you requested in the case that was heard in front of Attorney Burke. You have not requested those documents in this case. You've requested how Ms. McCammon responded to Ms. Vassell. That's all we have jurisdiction over.
But-
we don't have jurisdiction over what you requested in 2017-0615 because you did not make that request here.
When their production includes that original request, they can't have their cake and eat. They can't pick and choose. Once they introduce that,
You can't expand the request based on even the responsive. We don't have jurisdiction beyond Respondents 1.
They didn't open the door.
We don't have any jurisdiction beyond, Dear Miss McCammon, you received something on June 1st, 2017. I want to know how you responded to that email. That's all we have jurisdiction over. That's it. We can't do anything other than, and then you say, here's a complaint based on this request. So they're saying that they disclosed these 2 pages of
Understood.
and that is the responsive records that they disclosed to you in response to the request in this case. Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay,
You should
so
probably mark them then.
so
My-
these should be marked.
my point here is, Mrs. McCammon's response in this case is not responding to my FOIA request in this case. It's her response is to the 2017-0615. They never produced it. They hid it from me.
If you felt that the records you received in docket number 2017-0615 were incomplete or somehow not what you wanted,
Yep.
you could have done some things in that case. But this request is much more narrow, Mr. Hardison. You're saying, how did you respond to an email? That's what you asked Ms. McCammon for here.
May I?
Yes.
Mr. Hardison is saying, but this must be wrong because they gave me what I had received before. But his request is for the exact record that he had received before, because he's asking for a response to an earlier FOI request that ultimately,
May 19th, 2017.
yeah, right, that ultimately was the subject of a complaint heard by Attorney Perpetua. So it's just this inference that somehow if we give him the same record twice, there's a problem, is incorrect because he's asked for the same record twice.
That statement is false. They never produced this record in that case.
Okay, but we're not in that case.
Wait a minute.
We're in this case.
What did he just say? That is a false statement. I never received Mrs. McCammon's response in 0615.
Did you read- did you
I was
Yes.
responding to Mr. Hardison's claim that he had received the same record twice. If he didn't receive it on the first one, that's a separate issue, and I withdraw the comment. I had just relied upon Mr. Hardison's
But you
comment.
received these 2 pages in response to your request dated September 14th, 2018, that we're here to talk about today.
That's correct.
Okay, so should we mark these maybe
Please.
as respondents 2? Any
Sure.
objection?
2
No.
and 3.
2 and 3.
Yeah.
Just for simplicity, we have packets that have the responses in order, right? Like, so the acknowledgement email. So I don't know if you want to do it that way.
Okay, all right. So we'll do it that way.
Well, sure.
Okay.
Have Mr.
Do we
Hardison.
have, is one for Mr. Hardison?
I have copies for Mr. Hardison.
Why don't we have people identify themselves for The record.
Yes.
Jay Hardison, complainant, Darien.
Thomas Mooney, Shipman and Goodwin, representing respondents.
Attorney Malika Forbes, representing respondents.
Marjorie Sion, Director of Human Resources for the Darien Public Schools.
Okay, so I already have this top document, so.
Right.
So I already marked it as respondents
Respondents
one.
one.
So if you
But the
want
rest-
to just do it one at a time, because I think we're
Okay.
having.
That's fine.
Would it be easier for us to do it and hand them out one at a time?
I think so, because I don't want to mark respondents one twice. We
Well, I
already have it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, we
That's
already
fine.
have respondents one. So what
And-
else do the respondents have? Because this is,
Mr. Hardison, we gave you a packet.
Yep.
We'll just start over. Thank you. Okay.
Respondents two.
is that the acknowledgement?
The acknowledgement
Okay.
email.
Any objection to the acknowledgement coming in? The respondent's acknowledgement to
No.
a request? Okay, so respondents two is a one-page email dated September 18th, 2018, from Ms. Forbes to Mr. Hardison. Okay, that's two.
Third is the actual production email with the attachments.
So those 2 pages?
The 2 pages and the email that.
The cover and the 2 pages produced.
This is respondents,
It would be proposed 3, if you have no objection. This is,
2 and 3, or just 3?
We already gave you.
It's 2.
I'm going to make it 3, because it's the cover letter and 2 attachments.
We previously gave you respondents two, which is the acknowledgement email.
Right. Okay.
Any objection to respondents 3?
No.
Okay. So respondents 3, it's 4 pages, it's a cover email and 2 attachments. The email just runs over to the second page, so it's 4 pages in total. Okay. That's it. Okay, so that's basically,
Okay, Mr. Hardison has that, too.
And I,
yeah, you
Yes.
have respondents 3. Okay, that's what we have.
Thank you.
So we've got the request, we've got what they disclosed to you, and we've got their acknowledgement of your request, and we have what they disclosed to you. What else do you think, from your perspective, Mr. Hardison, do we need?
Well, I think it's very important to take administrative notice of 0615. They were found to have violated FOIA. In paragraph 6 of the commission's ruling, final ruling, it was found that they did not discover or acknowledge responsive documents. That's important. I should have objected. They lied.
Well, look, I mean, I'll take administrative notice of that file for what it's going to be worth, okay? But, you know, that's, I mean, we can take administrative notice of our whatever, you know, case we have,
Right.
okay? And there was production in it, and, you know, that's kind of settled already, you know?
Right.
Because there's no, you know, there hasn't been anything since then that I'm aware of, no orders to comply or anything like that. So you know, we're dealing with this, you know, with the Exhibit 3 is the production, you know, and if there's anything else, it would be under the claim of exemption, I take it, attorney-client. But other than that, I, you know, if there's missing documents, I don't know how, you know, what else there is.
Just an offer of proof.
An offer of proof.
We
you know.
brought, Attorney Forbes is here not as representing the district, but rather as a witness, and Attorney Forbes is prepared to speak to exactly what this process was that led to Respondents 3, that would explain that there are no other documents, and Attorney Forbes will be subject to cross-examination, and we're prepared to get to the bottom of this, which is there's no non-responsive records that have been withheld.
I'm missing the page here.
What do you miss?
I don't have the actual response.
What response?
I have the one that she read it,
Uh-huh.
but I don't have the actual.
This one? This
I'm
one?
sorry, Mr.
Correct.
Hardison.
Okay, so, because Respondents 3 is 4 pages.
So
I'm just trying to understand, in response to the request at issue in this case, the respondents disclosed 2 pages, is that right? And withheld other pages. We can't find out what they're claiming is exempt until we pass the case to them, but
Pass the case to.
the respondents. We haven't sworn anyone in, Mr. Hardison. All we're trying to do is
Right.
mark relevant documents. But I don't understand why, other than what we're going to hear from the parties, why we would need to mark anything else in this case.
Oh, I have other stuff besides 0615 to submit as an exhibit. My question, their response.
But how could you have anything else to put in as an exhibit if there's, I know you think you have plenty,
Well-
but they gave you 2 documents in response to your request dated September 14th, 2018.
Right.
Two pieces of paper, which is contained in Respondents 3, right?
Right.
And now there's other documents that they say are exempt. So we don't know what they are until we hear from the respondents. So basically you have what they claim, whether it's right or wrong, you have what they claim is responsive and non-exempt.
Right.
And you can tell us when you made your request what you received in response to the request at issue in this case, and then we will have to hear from them under oath as to what wasn't disclosed. And that's all there is to this
All right.
case.
So if they're going to respond with the original request in 0615, I don't understand why I can't submit all these as exhibits, because they're very pertinent to this case.
How are they pertinent?
There are at least 25 documents just here, before I get into what's actually responsive, that I do think is certainly admissible, of me requesting from Mrs. Ford's, Mrs. McCammon's response.
You didn't ask for those folks in this case. You asked for records from Miss McCammon in this case, and you filed a complaint about not receiving all responsive records from Miss McCammon.
That's true.
But the request is, again, if you read Respondents 1, this is all we have jurisdiction over. Not what was disclosed in response to your request in the previous case. Not what was disclosed in response to the previous case.
Well-
What was disclosed in response to the request in this case, they are not the same requests. The same requests are not at issue. Do you understand
I
that?
do understand that.
Okay.
But my question is, though, if they can respond, the only responsive document they produced 2. One was that she opened the email. The other was her actual response. That was not a response to the request in this case.
Okay, so they shouldn't have given you that, perhaps.
Could I just ask for clarification? It was not a response
He's
to the
saying that
request in
he's
this-
saying that this document,
You over-responded.
page 4 of Respondents 3,
Yes.
was not a response by Miss McCammon. But I think why they gave you page 4 of Respondents 3 is for the top part of it. Hello, Nadine. I have not received any correspondence. Thank you. Regards, Jill. I think that you have page 4 of Respondents 3 because of the top part, not because of the bottom part. And maybe they shouldn't have given you the bottom part.
But they did.
So they over-responded. That doesn't open the door on what was responsive in docket number 170615. I think they gave you, if I'm not mistaken, the 4th page of Respondents 3, because that's how Ms. McCammon responded.
Agreed.
We claim it is directly responsive to the request dated September 14th, 2008.
But that doesn't open the door to what was responsive in the case that is not at issue, that is closed, that is not before us today. We can't take all those records.
These are all requests and responses from Mrs. Forbes for Mrs. McCammon's response.
From Mrs. Forbes? Oh, okay.
Back and forth.
Okay.
And there's one in here that says, we do not have a response from Mrs. McCammon. Clearly that was not true. Clearly.
Okay.
I'm quite sure Mr. Hardison is describing records related to the other case.
2017.
Correct.
Maybe we should swear everybody in.
Okay.
Have a hearing.
Sorry?
Maybe we should swear in people who are
Sure.
going to testify.
Oh, okay. Yeah, we're about halfway through, but okay. All right. Whoever's going to testify, please stand up.
Wait a minute. What, I have stuff.
Yeah, we haven't gotten.
Okay.
We're gonna get.
We'll take it as you testify.
Okay,
Mr.
please
Hardison.
stand
All
up.
right,
Okay.
perfect.
Please raise your right hands. You solemnly swear, affirm, or declare that the evidence you should give concerning the cause now in question shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
I do.
All right, and just please state your name and add address and business
Just spell your last name for the record.
Okay, and spell it.
J. Hardison, Hardison.
Okay.
Malika Forbes, Melika, last name Forb as in boy, ES.
And your business address is Shipman Goodman, right?
Yeah. The Stanford office.
And
11 Nearwater, Darien, 06820.
Okay. All right. So we've already entered in some exhibits, and I don't, as a finder of fact in this matter, I mean, we're looking for. You've received items, Mr. Hardison. This is a very narrow scoped complaint, which is Respondent's Exhibit 1. It's narrow. You're saying that there are missing exhibits. It's not relevant for you to show me exhibits because we're only looking for missing ones. We have two or three exhibits, Exhibit 2 and 3 of the respondents that are their production to your request. The rest, they're claiming, they've claimed, but they haven't claimed on oath, but they're stating that the rest is protected under the attorney-client privilege.
Is that the claim?
Yes.
Okay.
Have I gotten everything?
I'd like to
correct?
address that at the appropriate
At the
time as
appropriate
well.
time, sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, so it's attorney-client privilege is being claimed.
Okay.
Okay.
And other than that, it would be the respondent's view, and I don't know about you, but I mean, it's the respondent's view that there are no other documents responsive,
That's correct.
and that other documents that may have been given to Mr. Hardison relate to either an overproduction or relevant to the 2017, May 19th, 2017 response.
For the purposes of this hearing, that's correct.
Yes.
We've obviously given Mr. Hardison many records over many.
Right, okay, yeah, thank you. Okay. And you're looking for missing documents, correct?
Correct.
All right. So where are we now?
Well, I mean,
Yeah.
you've satisfied your burden of proof,
But-
Mr. Hardison.
but wait,
You've
wait.
made a request for records. I know you want to read what it feels like and what
You're
it
trying to relitigate.
seems like is that you want to talk about 2017-0615, and it's just not relevant because the requested issue in this case is not the same request as you made in 2017-0615. And even if the respondents mistakenly gave you a piece of paper that was responsive in 2017-0615, it doesn't make everything that was responsive in 2017-0615 responsive in this case. What we need to hear about in this case, what Commissioner Hankins needs to hear about, is what you didn't get in this case.
Attorney
And we
Harmon?
can't hear about that until we pass the case to the respondents. But we don't really need, the plaintiff's burden of proof is very, very small. The respondents carry the burden of proof at the FOI.
Two things. Attorney Harmon, I won 0615.
Okay?
Number two, every one of these exhibits mentions Jill McCammon's response, which is the subject of this hearing. Every single one of these things I want to submit. And every response from Mrs. Forbes is, we gave you everything responsive, and one of them even says, there is no response from Mrs. McCammon. Clearly, that's not true.
Okay. So we have two papers disclosed to you.
But I want these in the record of, these are lies. Over
We're
and
not
over.
we're not adjudicating what happened in 2017.
I'm not trying to.
0615.
These are to support this case.
But you have those. Those you're saying were these records that are piled in front of you, were they disclosed to you in response to your September 14th, 2018 request?
No.
Okay. So they're not relevant then in this case.
The fact that they didn't disclose, trust me, there are a lot of things they haven't disclosed that I get anonymously. These are all regarding Mrs. McCammon's response.
So
which
you're
is
saying they're relevant because you have them and you didn't get them again?
No. Because they told me over and over, and there must be 25 or 30 different documents here that I kept saying, where is Mrs. McCammon's response?
Right.
There isn't one. Clearly that's not true.
Okay.
That needs to be in the record that she said there is no record from Mrs. McCammon. That's why we're even here today. I had to file this request because they failed to produce this response. So these are all supportive of that. I don't want to relitigate. 0615 is history. These are all responsive to why we're here today.
So you're saying that before the respondents told you that Mrs. McCammon didn't respond to the FOI request?
25, 30 times maybe.
And now you
I have it all in writing from emails from Mrs. Forbes.
that she didn't have responsive records, or that she didn't send a response to Ms. Vassell?
That they had given me everything responsive, and that there was no McCammon response. That is in one of these. Clearly, that was not true.
And really, the only thing that Miss McCammon said was, "I have not received any correspondence. Thank you." That's the response by Miss McCammon.
That's my whole point. I have 8 other, except for one who listed 21 documents. I have 7 other board members' responses coincident with her response, but around June 1 to June 8, that also say the exact same thing. That was found. They were all. That was found not to be true in 0615. By the
But
way.
we don't have jurisdiction
I
over
understand.
those other people's responses.
But why didn't they submit this one then? That's why I believe there are other documents.
I don't know. Well, there are other documents. They're telling us there are other documents. So,
But why wasn't this submitted when it was responsive in that case? That's why we're here today.
We first question the premise, which is that the document is responsive, and if we were relitigating that case, we would explain why. But it's not relevant to this case, which is, as you've said, very narrow. To the extent that Mr. Hardison is here claiming that in an earlier FOI request, we said there is no such responsive record,
right?
and in this case, we said here's a responsive record, and he's equating the two. That appears to be Mr. Hardison's problem. We contest his premise, which is that the 2 requests were identical, and a responsive record to this request is a responsive record to that request. But we're not here to relitigate that earlier case. We're here simply to explain how we responded in this case, and Attorney Forbes is prepared to do that.
Yet their production is a response to my request in 0615. I had
What production are you talking about, Mr. Hardison? Respondents
3. Yes.
So the
It is not.
one page document where she says, I have not received any correspondence.
Look at the request below. That's 0615.
But that is just attached to it because it follows it. You know, we can cross it out if you like.
If I could clarify, no, it follows it because when we have to, again, look back to this FOI request, which refers back to the earlier
Right.
FOI request. So that's why there's this commonality between a document that would have been responsive in Mr. Hardison's view to the earlier request, a premise we challenge. But the response in Respondents 3 is directly responsive, not to the earlier request. Mr. Hardison makes reference to the earlier request, but our response was driven by his request dated September 14th, 2018, which is, I want to see your response
To that email.
to that earlier email. So we keep being sucked back into the earlier matter, but in part because Mr. Hardison's current FOI request that's pending before the Commission in this hearing makes reference to that earlier matter. But the only question before the Commission is whether these records are responsive to this request, which we say yes. And second, are there any other documents that are being withheld? We say privilege, and we're prepared to present those for in-camera inspection, and otherwise, no.
Okay. All right. I think what I'd like to do, okay, is hear from Attorney Forbes. Hear from Attorney Forbes. See if with that, okay, and then we'll the end of her testimony, you have the ability to cross-examine.
Right.
Okay. We'll see what happens after that.
But I still have stuff only relevant to this case to submit as exhibits.
Okay, and that proves that there's a missing document from this narrow request.
I believe it does.
Let's.
Well, I get the standard response every time we have either redacted or withheld documents.
Right.
Now I know they withheld. This is the first time I've actually known that they actually withheld documents.
Okay, and the
Right,
withholding
because
of the documents.
they have to prove why here at this proceeding.
Yeah, the withholding of the documents seems to be under the attorney-client exception, for exemption. Okay, so
If I may, just because this is a hearing on the record, Mr. Hardison just made a misrepresentation. He said this is the first he's heard, but Respondents 3 expressly states, please note that the district redacted or withheld records pursuant to 1210B10 of the Freedom of Information Act. So the statement that this is the first he's heard is simply incorrect.
What
Well,
page are you looking
I'm
at?
Respondent 3.
Page 1?
He's wrong.
Page 1.
Redacted or, not and, redacted
And
or.
or. It says and or.
Yeah, but that means it could be either.
Okay. I
That
really
doesn't mean
think
both.
we need to pass the case because we have to hear about what was withheld.
Yeah, sometimes the finer points of
No, it matters.
Well-
It absolutely matters.
Okay.
It's the first they've said, we withheld.
Oh, okay.
And or does not mean both.
And you know when the first moment they have to say why they withheld documents?
Hopefully now.
This is the actual first moment where
Right.
it's required.
Right.
There's no part of the FOI that says they have to tell you prior to the contested case hearing what they withheld and why. They usually do, but this is when they have to tell the hearing officer what they withheld
Understood.
and why. So maybe we should give them a chance to do that.
Well, I've been trying to ease my way into that. Okay.
Yes.
All right. We're going to have Attorney Forbes testify now.
Attorney Forbes, could you please identify your role in this case?
I assisted the district in responding to the Freedom of Information request at issue in this case.
And could you, using, to the extent necessary, Respondents 1, 2, and 3 for reference, could you please explain to the hearing officer how you assisted the district and what records were identified and how they were produced?
Sure. So on September 14th, 2018, the complainant made a request for a response of a particular board member to a June 1st, 2017 email that was sent by a district employee, Nadine Vassell. In response, the district conducted its usual process, which is first to acknowledge the request, which was done on September 18th, 2018, within the 4 business days required.
That's respondents.
2. From there, I, along with several district employees, worked to locate responsive records. And also, just to note, the complainant also requested any and all records created by any person with respect to the FOIA request at issue. So there were communication between myself and district employees in trying to locate responsive records, including the Director of Human Resources as well as the Director of the IT department. Once those records were located, they were reviewed. The potentially responsive records were reviewed, and we identified the records that were in fact responsive and non-exempt. From there, we communicated with the individuals who had relevant information to see if there was any other records that could potentially be responsive that we had not located on the server. And from there, I provided Mr. Hardison with the 2 responsive records, 2 pages of records that were responsive, that were non-exempt, and then we withheld the internal communication between myself and the district employees in responding to this request.
In responding to part 2 of the request.
In response to part 2 of the request, yes.
So is that the only document that's been withheld?
Correct. So
Your communication, because that's a document that was
created in response.
in responding to this request.
That's
So that's
correct.
that one attorney-client privilege document.
Not one, but the communications that we had. So the communications with the IT department about what should be searched, as well as the communication record, the communication between myself and the HR director.
Okay.
And the individuals who could potentially have other relevant information.
So the only documents that were withheld in response to the Part B
Correct.
of the underlying request. Is
Correct.
that right?
Any and all records created by any person with respect to this FOIA request. And that's all I
I
have to
have no
say.
further questions. Yeah.
Mr. Hardison?
That's it for them?
Well, you can cross-examine.
So this is the first time you've tried to locate Mrs. McCammon's response?
Specifically, yes, in response to your September 14th, specifically searched the server for that response to Nadine's June 1st, 2017 email.
But I have documents here that say there was no response from Mrs. McCammon long before this request was ever made from you.
I object.
Is it no? I think that no response or no responsive records. I think that that's the problem here. That
But the question on cross was, but I have evidence that before I made the request an issue, blah, blah, blah. And by its very nature, that's an irrelevant question because it presupposes events prior to the request even being made. We're here to talk about a request and how it was responded to. The question is seeking, again, to delve back into the past history on another FOI case.
I'll sustain the objection.
I'd just like to point out that,
you have to do cross and legal argument at the end, Mr. Hardison.
okay, Mrs. Forbes,
It's Ms.
Ms. Forbes, is Mrs. McCammon's response dated June 6, 2017 in Respondents 3?
Yes.
Was Mrs. McCammon's response in request, was her response in response to the Thursday, June 1st email from Ms. Vazel that included my original FOIA request in 2017-0615?
Could you repeat the question?
Was her response that you supplied in response to my original request in 2017-0615?
I need you to say
This is my request in 2017-0615. This is Mrs. McCammon's response on June 1st. June 6th, sorry. Is that true?
So, no, because you started the question by stating that the June 1st, 2017 was your request to the May 19th, 2017 request, and that's incorrect.
Did Mrs. Vazel on June 1st send an email to the entire Board of Ed? Yes or no?
Yes, and additional people.
That included my FOIA request in 2017-0615 below.
Yes.
Okay. Is Mrs. McCammon's response that you submitted as Respondents 3 in response to my FOIA request?
No.
What do you mean no?
If you have a question, I'm happy to answer it.
Is she responding to Mrs. Vazel's email?
She is responding to Ms. Vassel's email, yes.
Does Ms. Vazel's email include my FOIA request in 06?
But it's not a response to the underlying request in 2017.
Of course it is.
It's not.
It is not. That's the disconnect here.
What is it?
It's an acknowledgement of having received it, but it's not a responsive record in 2017-0615. A responsive record in 2017-0615 would be a record that you requested in the underlying request in that case. It's not a responsive record because it's not what you asked for in 2017-0615.
The district was found to be concealing responsive records in 0615. That's why I make I'd like administrative note, or whatever it's called, taken of
It's unfair, it's
paragraph
untrue,
6.
and it's irrelevant.
It is irrelevant, though, Mr. Hardison, and the reason why is that in the previous case, you said give me A, B, and C. And in this case, you're saying give me D. And what you're trying to do is say D is the same as A, B, and C, and it's not. You asked for certain records in that previous case.
Okay.
Whether you got them or didn't get them or however that case went, this is a different request. How did you respond to the email? Not give me those records from 2017-0615. You just can't make this case that case because the requests that underlying the complaints are different.
It's not the associated property.
I don't know how I can say it any clearer.
It's mathematics. It's not the associated
I'm
property.
not good at math. But.
All right. Did you supply, in response to Mrs. Vazel's request of the board members, initially only 6 of the board members' responses?
I object. we're talking about responses from other board members that goes outside the scope of this complaint, which is limited to Ms. McCammon's response.
Also stating that. It's a very narrow request that you've made. So, questions to this?
Okay. Is this the first time in response to this request that you searched for Mrs. McCammon's response?
Specifically searched for, this is the first time that the district specifically searched for Mrs. McCannon's request as an isolated response.
That's not my question. Not as an isolated. Is Mrs. McCammon,
But this
is Mrs. McCammon a Darien Public Schools board member?
Yes.
Is Mrs. McCammon subject to all FOIA requests made of Darien Public Schools board?
To the extent that it relates to something that she would have, yes.
Okay. So you're telling me, despite all this documented evidence to the contrary, this is the first time you have searched for Mrs. McCammon's response?
My testimony is that your September 14th, 2018 request is the first time you've ever requested Mrs. McCannon's response to Mrs. Nadine Vassal's June 1st, 2017 email, and the district conducted a search in response to that request, and we produced that response to you.
So,
That's the precise answer to the question.
and I would like to say that's not true.
I object.
But that's argument. That's argument. Mr.
But I have
Mr.
document. If I
Hardison.
can introduce these as exhibits, this is not the first time they've searched. She has searched for that, and she has told me in the past it did not exist.
I don't know what you're. I honestly
Well,
can't.
can I submit these as exhibits?
We need what we need to know is.
This is not the first time she's searched for it.
I think you're
Well, you asked-
conflating the request in 2017-0615 with the request in the instant case, and you just can't because they're not the same. So what was responsive?
I have direct evidence that contradicts her statement just now under oath. I would like to submit that as an exhibit.
I don't know how you could have it because you've never asked for these records before. I don't see anywhere in 2017-0615 when you say, Ms. McCammon, you received an email on June 1st, 2017. What did you say when you received that email? That's not what you asked for in the other case.
In 0615, I ultimately received 8 of the 9 board members' responses.
Right.
I did not receive Mrs. McCammon.
Responses as in responsive records. Responsive records. What was responsive to the underlying request in that case?
And if you have that case, paragraph 6 says they did not discover or acknowledge responsive records.
And it's a totally different request. That's the problem.
It's the same.
It isn't, Mr. Hardison. It isn't. I don't know how we can explain that it isn't any more than we already have, but it isn't. So, do you have any other questions for
Yes.
Forbes?
So, you said you withheld documents regarding communications only pertinent to this request.
Could you repeat your question?
You withheld documents. The withheld documents in this case are basically communications with IT people, and I can't remember how you phrased it, individuals that may have been involved or were all
Mr. Hardison, I believe she testified that documents that she withheld were attorney-client communications to one or two IT people or something like that, looking for the documents. That's the only documents that you withheld.
Trying to come up with respondents.
Yeah, under the
In
attorney-client
responding to the request,
Right.
the documents that were created following the September 14th request, the September 14th, 2018 request, any communication that I engaged in with district employees were withheld as a part of that because you requested.
And are the district employees your client?
Correct.
Okay. And were you trying to help your client respond to the underlying request that we're talking about today?
Correct.
And did they have concerns for you about how to go about that?
Correct.
And so did you give them advice on how you thought they should go about that?
Yes.
And did you share that advice with anyone outside of your client and you?
No.
Okay.
Do district employees include Mrs. McCammon?
She is not a district employee, So for clarification, it should say district personnel.
Okay. the
So there
Board
may
of
be,
Education folks.
so there may be other withheld documents from Mrs. McCann.
Communications that I had with district personnel or board members would be the record, in response to the September 14th, 2018 request, would be the records that were withheld. And we are prepared to submit those records in camera for inspection.
Mr. Hardison, would you like to make a motion to have the commissioner look at those records in camera? Or do you want to accept that they're privileged?
I absolutely want them looked at in camera. I'm also going to dispute the attorney-client privilege claimed, but
That's part and parcel of me looking at them in camera.
can I do that now with documentation?
I think you've just done that.
Well-
In other words, no, what I'm saying is I'm going to order that you produce those documents that you're claiming are exempt from the attorney-client privilege.
Right.
Okay.
I'm arguing they're not exempt.
Well, I know, and what I'm going to do, I'm going to look at them in camera to determine whether or not they're in accordance with Attorney Forbes' testimony.
Right, but this, which I'd like to submit as an exhibit, it's basically the district waiving its attorney-client privilege. A member of the board has stated publicly what was included, at least in Mr. Mooney's advice.
We're talking about Attorney Forbes' advice to board members trying to gather the records that are responsive in this case.
To the September 14, 2018 request.
Right.
That's all they're asking for in terms of an exemption.
Right, but Mrs. McCann's response in Respondents 3, I believe they've waived, regarding her response, attorney-client privilege to that, which would include supportive documents that are going to be submitted in camera. That's all for you to decide, but I'd like to...
I would ask for an argument. Mr. Hardison simply says we've waived the privilege.
When did they waive it?
And how?
And how did they waive it?
Here's a board member in a federal court affidavit submission on Feb. 4th, 2019.
When?
Feb. 4th, 2019.
They've waived the legal advice that they solicited and or received from Attorney Forbes in response to responding to the September 14, 2018 request.
This is from Attorney Mooney, which regards Respondents 3. So you basically...
So they've disclosed Attorney Forbes'
May I see,
communications? Yeah. Why don't you pass that and see if there's an objection?
Well, I don't care if there's an objection, to be honest with you.
Well-
I expect an objection.
Okay. Well, that's just how
This
it
is-
works.
this is
You
filed in
can't-
federal
you have
court.
to, if you wanted,
I understand. But this states in...
Oh, wait, let Attorney, we need to look at it first.
So what I understand this to be is a affidavit of Mother Doe in a federal case unrelated to this FOI request. I don't see anything with my name where I've signed it or I've produced the record. How Mother Doe has characterized my statements is her business, and that would be a whole separate question whether she's correct or incorrect. But I would say that simply having my name on a record of an adverse party to the Darien Public Schools, how she's described unrelated events, is completely irrelevant to this matter.
Mother Doe is a...
it's
she's a board member.
I don't know.
That's false as well.
I don't know.
She's not a board member.
Way too attenuated. No,
Yeah.
I'm not going to allow it.
So do you have any other questions for Attorney Forbes, or should we go to closing statements here?
Well, my question for Attorney Forbes is, why was this not produced in the earlier case?
I object.
Okay, I would sustain it because we're not talking about the earlier case. We're talking about this under the confines of September 14th, 2018, that request.
Do you have another question?
I have
for
one
us?
last question. So are you confirming that there are additional withheld records from Mrs. McCann?
As I previously testified, the district, and you were notified on October 3rd, 2018, that the district withheld and or redacted records that are protected, in our belief, by attorney-client privilege.
That's not my question.
I think that was your
Well,
question.
I would object to the extent that the complainant is seeking now to get into what was the advice and what records were, in whether those records related to attorney-client privilege related to Ms. McCammon or otherwise.
So-
That's part of your job as the hearing officer.
So they say there's records that are privileged and that they shouldn't have to disclose because they're privileged by the attorney-client relationship.
Right.
You disagree. And the way to really resolve it is to ask the commissioner to look at them.
Okay, so anyway,
Well, but I'd like to submit this as an exhibit.
that's way too attenuated, no. Okay, so I am,
But this Respondents 3 is the response in this case, right? That's Mrs. McCammon's, wherever I put it, response in the instant case.
Right.
Hello, Nadine. I have not received any correspondence. Thank you. That's her response.
To the request you made in this case.
That's
yes.
correct.
Yes.
Okay. I'm saying her response is related to Mr. Mooney's comment here, and I believe they've.
That's somebody else characterizing Mr. Mooney's comment.
It's a sworn federal court affidavit. He can say it's not true, but it doesn't matter.
Do you have any other questions for Attorney Forbes? Do you have any other questions? Because we're on cross right now.
My last question is, Mrs. Forbes, when did you take over production from the district for the FOIA request?
it would be for this September 14th, 2018.
Well, no. Going back historically.
Well, we're only dealing with this one, so.
Well, it's got to go back at least to Mrs. McCammon's response that they provided June 1st, 2017.
Well,
I'm only interested
in this
I don't
case.
understand why it's
It's
relevant.
a simple question.
But
When
why
did she
is it
take over?
relevant to whether or not the records they didn't give you are or are not attorney-client privileged? How is when Attorney Forbes took over helpful to the commissioner in deciding whether the records are exempt or not exempt?
I'm not talking about the attorney-client
But that's
privilege.
the only issue we're here to decide.
Not attorney-client privilege.
That's the issue in this case, is whether or not the records that
The
you
withheld
didn't get
records.
are privileged, and therefore you can't have them, or are not privileged, and therefore you should get them. And how is, when Attorney Forbes took over, helpful to the commissioner in determining whether the records are privileged
All right, let me restate the
or
question.
not privileged?
Were you responsible for the district's production as of the receipt of my FOIA request in this case?
I'm sorry, could you say the question again, please?
Were you responsible for the production when my FOIA request was received for the district?
The September 14th, 2018
Correct.
request? I assisted my client in responding to your September 14th, 2018
Okay.
request.
In camera, how long do you think you'll need to get us with the index and the records, and what do you think?
We have the records.
I have the
It would be
records.
a matter of preparing the index so we can do it promptly.
Okay, so you know you have to hand deliver the records to me, so just make sure that I'm in the office. So do you want to say, today is Tuesday, I want to say 1 week from Friday, just make an appointment to come in, is that okay?
Sure.
And then I'll take the actual records, I'll lock them up, and the index, a copy of the index will go to Mr. Hardison, and then the commissioner will be able to look at
And
it.
just the mechanics of this, given that Attorney Forbes is in our Stamford office,
Oh.
we will collaborate, and I'll bring the records.
Okay, perfect, just give a call so that I'm here,
Yes.
Attorney Mooney, okay? All right, so,
And I take it you want to write briefs in this matter?
Yes.
Okay, all right.
okay.
Hey, I'm the commissioner.
I didn't, no, okay,
all
I
right.
didn't think anybody would.
Oh,
Hang on, I still have documents relevant to this.
All right,
So I have no questions on redirect.
thank you.
Oh, no, I mean, I don't mean about briefs.
Yeah.
Okay.
Again, Mr. Hardison, we're, just interested in missing documents from the,
Understood?
okay.
These literally, well, you don't care. But These are all back and forth with
Use
Mrs.
a math thing again, I think, is like trying to prove a null hypothesis. I took 2 years of math during the summer because I liked it so much.
If I was good at math, I would have gone to medical school.
Is it relevant whether that record was submitted for in-camera inspection in the other case or not?
No. No, in other words, the prior one is gone, okay? And I'm only really interested in missing documents from this
Understood.
matter.
How about evidence that previous documents have been withheld? Hence,
In reality, Mr. Hardison, the commissioner has everything he needs once he gets that in-camera submission to determine all of the matters at issue in this case.
And I'm, interested in seeing, the briefs, see what they have to say.
all right, let me try this one. This is a
I mean, it's the narrow issue we're talking about. That's all.
This is an email from Tara Ottman, chairman of the Darien Board, dated June 1st, 2018. This is in response to an email I sent out to the public.
No, that's not relevant.
It says all the emails were available on the district server as the administration prepared its response to you. This email was not produced.
Definition, the request in issue here is September 14, 2018. This is an unrelated communication because it predates that by 3 months.
Yeah. Again, Mr. Hardison, I said it a number of times. I'm only interested in this. It's a very narrow issue, and I believe that I have all the evidence necessary to make a decision.
My only point about this is the record they produced, Respondents 3, is in response to my FOIA request in the other case, right? They're saying they had all the emails on the district server at that time.
I don't think it was responsive to your previous request, but even if it was, we can't adjudicate that previous request.
All right. This is from the remedial brief, I guess it's called, in the other case. But this is it's all about failure to produce Mrs. McCamen's response.
No, it's not relevant, Mr. Hardison.
Well, we'll keep trying here.
But you really don't.
You don't have to keep trying.
There's nothing that you need to give the commissioner. He has everything that he
Yeah.
needs in order to decide the matters that are at issue in this case. When he gets those,
That's the actual request. Okay, I'm listening.
Well, when do you guys want to get the briefs done? Mr. Hardison, I guess the ball's kind of in your court. When
If Mr.
Yeah.
Hardison is willing to reconsider, we do not believe briefs are necessary in this case.
no, I mean, I don't. If there's something after the records come in that we could always ask for.
Yeah, I mean, I want to give Mr. Hardison,
Per my earlier request, number one, I do want to file a brief, and number two, I'd like Mrs. Vasil and bare minimum Mrs. McCammon subpoenaed to come back in and continue this hearing.
So not relevant to the matters that are at issue in this case. The matter at issue in this case are the documents that you did not receive attorney-client privilege. That's the issue. You say that they're not. They say that they are. They're going to give them to the commissioner in camera, and he's going to make that determination.
Right.
That's what's at issue in this case, Mr. Hardison.
Okay.
When do you want to submit a brief, Mr. Hardison? How long do you?
2 or 3 weeks, it doesn't matter to me.
okay,
So in-cameras are going to come in a week from
That would be March
this
1st.
Friday. So that's March 1st. A week from this Friday is March 1st.
March
A week from this Friday is March 1st. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay, thank
15th
you.
or 22nd or something
well,
like
the
that.
Ides of March is the 15th.
I was thinking
not
that.
a
That's
very
why I
lucky
was
day.
that's why I
What?
suggested that.
March 15th, Ides of March. It's not a very lucky day.
Okay, so March.
How about add another 7 on that, March 22nd?
That would be fine.
For briefs.
March 22nd
briefs,
for
yes.
briefs. Okay, perfect.
These are all legal invoices that show how much time they spent on this.
Which is totally not relevant to the matter at issue in this case, Mr. Hardison.
Some of it maybe.
You call them simultaneous, right? I don't call them cross, you call them simultaneous.
Simultaneous what? Briefs?
Briefs.
Oh, yeah, if you're going to file a brief.
If anybody's.
This is
Yeah.
the last thing I have. This may or may not be moot now that I understood. Now that I know
You're
that
getting it.
that they withheld records,
Yeah.
but these legal invoices or invoice, and it's interesting.
Yeah,
And
it's,
invoices
it might
No,
be.
this is concurrent with this case. This is
Yeah.
related to Mrs. McCamon's her production of Mrs. McCamon's response.
Yeah, but it's a
Again,
legal, it's
no.
an invoice, so it wasn't requested, so it's not relevant to whether or not the documents that were requested are attorney.
No, that's not relevant.
Well, now that we know there are multiple emails, that's the point of this. They only responded with one, but one of these invoice items says emails plural, and then
You should
below
have
it
been a
says
detective.
Yeah.
no, and below it says email.
Okay, so in camera,
All right.
March 1st, 2019, briefs, March 22nd, 2019, we're going to go off the record, right? Are we?
Yes, we're all set, okay? Listen,
Thank you for your attention.
I like your spirited defense and offense, okay?
Right.
Thank you, and drive safely back.
Thank you.
Wherever you're going.